Many moons ago, I visited the Deb system in Kerbal Space Program, which was to be the first interstellar destination that players could unlock in Kerbal Space Program 2, which obviously went kaput, and so modders took it upon themselves to add it to Kerbal Space Program 1 with the mod Promised Worlds, and they did, and it was amazing. I explored the entire system with a Kraken-powered SSTO. I'll put a link to that video in the description, where you'll also find links to today's sponsor, Daedalic Entertainment and Game Excite, who are launching their new game, Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown. More on that later, though I think it's kind of a fitting sponsor, considering that today we'll be crossing the unknown in KSP, as KSP2 always planned to, initially at least, feature 3 star systems: Kerbal, Deb, and Tuun. And Promised Worlds has now added Tuun to Kerbal Space Program 1, so we're going to go ahead and build the rocket that you can see coming together on screen. And no bamboozles. Unlike before, I took feedback on board that you guys weren't the biggest fans of the whole Kraken Drive Grand Tour format of the Deb video, so this time we're not using any Kraken drives or any other exploits. It's all 100% legit, and I decided to build this with sustainability in mind. We're not just sending a crew to Tuun and back, we're going to establish a space colony with fuel reserves and a mining vessel to support multiple missions to Tuun, which of course complements the Dres space station and mining facility I built a while ago, which might sound weird to those unfamiliar with Promised Worlds, so I'll elaborate. In Promised Worlds, you can visit the Deb and Tuun systems in 2 ways. The first is to go there legit, i.e. plot maneuver node for a giant burn, usually a burn that requires mods like Far Future Technologies or something. And then there's method 2, which is intended for stock KSP enjoyers, in that there are 2 wormholes in orbit of Dres. One warps you to Deb, the other warps you to Tuun, and so that's how I'm going to go to Tuun today, and that's why I'm keeping this vessel 100% stock, since I figured the wormholes are kind of intended for stock players, or at least Stockalike players. So the rocket is coming together really well. Right now you can see me putting together the massive fuel tanker, which will periodically descend down to the surface of the planet we're going to focus on today, fill up its huge fuel tanks, and redock with the space station, holding enough in fuel reserves for multiple missions for the space station's surface lander, which is now beginning construction on screen, before the mining rig needs to return down to the surface. And during mining expeditions, the space station has a large fuel tank of its own, to hold enough fuel for about 2.5 missions down to the surface and back for the crewed lander. So even when the mining ship is away, the space station can continue to support crew landings and returns. And the crew lander is essentially done. It's rather modest, and we've got this interesting landing gear set up. So I should probably reveal which planet we're going to focus on in the Tuun system. That is going to be the planet Puff, one of the few planets that we have photos of in Kerbal Space Program 2. They made the assets, but they never added it to the game, obviously. And it's really cool. It's got this big surface ocean, like a massive ocean, and this kind of like really cool rocky other part of it, the bit part that isn't the ocean. So I think it is honestly the most interesting looking planet of all the Promised Worlds planets, at least in the Tuun system. So that's where we're going to be going. So that's kind of, as you can see, we've kind of built the actual main spacecraft itself. You know, we've got the mining ship, the surface lander. Oh yeah, so I was talking about why the surface lander has that weird design. So yes, because Puff has an ocean as well as a rocky surface, I wanted the lander to be able to land on water, basically. So we have this kind of like, I guess I want to call them like lily pad landing legs. They extend out, so we had a nice large surface area for the lander to sit flat in the waters of Puff. So that's the kind of the logistics of the design of the lander. We've talked about the mining ship. We've got that big orange fuel reserve tank there as well, and then we've got like a laboratory and a crew module. Basically, we've got like a miniature space station. I'm gonna pretend there are like cryogenic like beds inside the space station, because this is going to be a long mission. We've not got a gravity ring either, because I wanted to keep things stock, and I just couldn't be bothered to build a stock gravity ring. I'm so spoiled now by Stockalike station parts Redux mod that it's just building stock gravity rings. I'm just like, I get depressed. So there's no gravity ring, but we can pretend that the Kerbals have their habitation cryogenic freezing module, so in theory it shouldn't be an issue anyway. And yeah, now we're just building the big fairing that's going to encompass this craft, and then well, now I've kind of built the complicated bit, now we're going to build the simple bit, and the simple bit is going to be a big dumb booster underneath the main stack. So we've built kind of the second stage, now we're building the first stage. We have to kind of build weirdly because the vehicle assembly building wasn't tall enough for me to actually build it properly. But there we are, we've kind of got like a triple core setup, unlike, you know, your Falcon Heavies, your Delta IV Heavies. The side boosters won't detach and leave the central core running. They're all just one big monolithic block. So now we are in the tracking station, because I'm going to use Kerbal Alarm Clock to time warp to a Kerbin to Dres transfer window. Although, I think it got it a bit wrong, because when we actually do this mission, we're not at a very optimal, we're not at a transfer window from Kerbin to Dres. That was a bit annoying, unfortunately. Anyway, before we continue, I must now give a shout out to today's sponsor, Daedalic Entertainment and Game Excite, who've teamed up with me to launch their new game, Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown. Voyager was the Star Trek that I grew up with, and if you ever watched it and ever thought, what if Janeway called the shots differently? Well, this game is basically that. It puts you in command of the USS Voyager, stranded impossibly far from home in the Delta Quadrant, managing your crew, your ship, and your resources. Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown is an epic story-driven survival strategy game which has roguelike elements, meaning that every run is different. You'll be repairing critical systems, managing power, sending crew on dangerous away missions, scanning anomalies, and battling hostile enemy ships, and constantly deciding who does what, and sometimes who doesn't make it back. I really love how your choices shape the timeline. You can really lean into risk, play it safe, or go completely off canon and see how badly things spiral, or surprisingly succeed. Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown launches on February the 18th on PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch 2. You can check it out using the link at the very top of the description. Massive thanks again to Daedalic and Game Excite for sponsoring. And so the rocket sets off at a blistering frame rate, not. But with video editing, we can speed that up. And look, I finally remembered that the camera tools mod is a thing. So I decided to capture this launch a little bit more cinematically than I normally record launches by having this flyby Doppler effect camera view. Pretty nifty, I think. Anyway, as you can see, we're travelling with the three main character Kerbals here, Jebediah, Bill, and Bob Kerman, which means that I do intend on this not being a one-way mission. So yeah, just another layer of complexity to what we're trying to accomplish here. In fact, this video is not going out on Saturday if I get this completed on the current schedule, actually, just because it took longer than I anticipated to get it done. So we're doing a Monday upload for Kerbal Space Program this week. Normally it's every Saturday, of course, and so if you're not subscribed and like this sort of thing, then this is the sort of thing you'll like. So hey, hit that subscribe button below to see more of this sort of thing, I guess. That being said, I didn't miss last Saturday. I made a sort of quick SSTO video just to fill the gap, appease the YouTube algorithm and all that, but this is kind of like, consider this the main video for last week. Anyway, part of the reason why I got a bit delayed with the creation of this video is that I initially planned to do a mission to Gerdama, which is the Kerbin equivalent planet in the Deb system. However, I vastly underestimated how challenging it would be to design a fully reusable and, more to the point, fully sustainable mission to its surface and back, which is what this mission is to the planet Puff, since you need a huge amount of Delta V to return to Gerdama orbit from its surface. Oh, there goes the first stage, by the way. And unlike Kerbin, Gerdama doesn't have an oxygenated atmosphere, so, Rapier engine-powered SSTOs are a non-starter, and I just kept hitting the wall when trying to design a rocket-powered SSTO that could ferry crew to and from the surface. And that's without even getting to designing the mining ship that can, restock its tankers to keep everything supplied with fuel. Though, I guess, a mining ship could visit one of the lower gravity moons of Gerdama to get its ore, rather than going down to the surface of Gerdama itself every time. Anyway, I'm not sure why I'm spending so long talking about this hypothetical mission that never actually happened, instead of talking about what's happening right now on screen on this non-hypothetical mission that actually took place. I mean, as far as I know, I guess there's a non-zero chance that I'm sitting in a loony bin somewhere with a straitjacket on, mumbling about space frogs and 45-degree angles. So yeah, anyway, as you can see, moving on, we've made it to space, and there we are. We've ditched the second stage of the ascent craft, so now we now have the interstellar spaceship all ready to go. We have this kind of like glitched struts just here, so I disconnected those. One thing I forgot to do is, if you look at kind of the gameplay screen, we've got the front command pod there where all the Kerbals are currently on board. My plan was that once we circularize, which is about to happen now, about to form that circularization burn. Here we go. Kind of a slow burn, we can speed that footage up. So my plan was that we would undock that forward command pod section, flip it around, then dock with the lower space station parts. We've got the Landacan part, the laboratory part, and then the 4-seat crew pod part, which in my headcanon contains all the cryogenic habitation beds and all that, so the Kerbals are not just sitting in their chairs for many years in a row, but I just completely forgot to do that for this mission. So just pretend now that I am a competent player of this game, Kerbal Space Program, and pretend that I undocked the forward command pod and redocked it with the space station, and so the Kerbals now have a nice large living space rather than being cramped up in that Apollo-style command pod. I really don't know why. I was so gutted when I was basically about to finish the mission, and I was like, oh my goodness, my plan was to do this. Why did I not do this? Oh well, I guess you live and you learn, don't you? So we're doing the first of our Kerbin escape burns, of which there are going to be 3 in total, just because we have very low thrust to weight ratio, despite the fact we've got, how many engines is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nuclear engines. Even with the 7 engines and a sizable number of our liquid fuel and oxygen tanks empty, just because we're going to fill them up with a mining ship, we still have a very heavy dry mass. So despite the fact we have 7 engines, it's still not really enough for the burns to be not very, very long. So yeah, luckily we can speed the footage up with the power of video editing, but these are some long old burns. And burns are more efficient, well, these sorts of burns I should say, are more efficient when burning as close to Kerbin as possible, thanks to the Oberth effect. So by splitting the burn into 3, we're maximizing the amount of time spent burning at periapsis, and therefore being efficient, which was good, because as I mentioned earlier in the tracking station, Kerbin Alarm Clock didn't really put us on a very good Kerbin to Dres transfer window. And as you can see, if you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Dres, that's well over 90 degrees. And in my kind of understanding, is that a Kerbin to Dres transfer window is actually more akin to about, I think it's like 82 degrees. Like Dres should be 82 degrees ahead of Kerbin. So then I just time warped arbitrarily to try and get a closer encounter with Dres, and I really struggled. I never had any issue. I mean, I guess maybe when I first started playing the game I had issues, but I've never had this much trouble getting an encounter with Dres. I cut out a lot of footage, okay, in which I was just sat in the sat in the map view with the Mununo planner, trying to desperately get some sort of vague encounter with Dres, and I just could not get them. No, I don't know, maybe I was just stressed because I was on a time budget, or I was just launching at a completely incorrect transfer window, I don't know. So I eventually managed to force a Dres encounter, but it's a long way away. We've got to wait like an entire year. We've got to basically do a complete orbit around the sun in order to encounter Dres, which is not what I had hoped would happen, basically. So apologies for that. I really don't know what happened. I'm putting my hands up here, guys. I'm sorry. I'll try better next time. I won't use Kerbal Alarm Clock to get the transfer window. I'll just eyeball it like I always do. And people give me crap saying, oh, Matt, you should be using proper tools. Well, I used a proper tool, and I couldn't get an encounter with Dres to save my life. Maybe I was just tired or being stupid, I'm not sure. But I just, for the life of me, could not get an encounter with Dres, and I was getting so frustrated. So eventually I got so frustrated, I was like, right, fine, we'll just do a really long cruise to Dres. We'll go all the way around the sun. We were just pretending the Kerbals have, cryogenic habitation at this point, so it shouldn't matter in the canon of things, but yeah, so where are we now? We're 1 year, 76 days into the mission. We'll keep that in mind and see how much time passes before we actually enter the Dres system. So we have about a 1 kilometer per second delta V burn. That was a great way of phrasing that. Course correction to actually get our Dres encounter, so we're going to execute that now. Once again, we can speed the footage up massively to just fast forward through this very long burn, and let's see if we get that Dres encounter. They don't even know what the encounter nodes are, sorry. And up, there we go. Well, we kind of overshot it a little bit, so let's go ahead and focus on Dres in the map screen and see if we can get that Dres encounter to come back. I thought I was just going to burn retrograde just blindly, but I guess I actually made a maneuver node to try and do things quote unquote properly. So yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Dres has 2 wormholes orbiting it. One is called, actually I can't remember their names. One begins with K, one begins with B. I think the one that begins with B takes you to Tuun. The one that begins with K takes you to Deb. You might have noticed we have a spacecraft in orbit of Dres. That's the Dres Gateway Space Station, which I built quite a few weeks ago. I'll put a link on screen if I remember to do so. And then like a card on screen. I'll put a link in the description as well to watch if you want to watch that video. I haven't been completely honest with the presentation of this though. So basically, when I installed Promised Worlds 2.0, for some reason it deleted the Dres Gateway Station that I installed there a few weeks ago. So I had to basically just cheat it. I'm not going to fly it back, right? So I used cheats to reinsert it into Dres orbit. So sorry about that. I feel like it's kind of not too cheaty, right? Because I might be using some cheats later on in this video, but I will be justifying it, and I don't consider it properly cheating, but we'll get to that as we get there. For now, we have yet another gigantic burn that's going to capture us in the Dres systems. Dres is actually a deceptively hard place to visit, at least in terms of engineering a craft that has enough fuel to do so, because it has it's quite far away from Kerbin. Like, it's between the orbits of Juno and Jool. So it takes a big old burn to get there, and it itself has very small gravity wells, so the O-berth effect may as well not exist, so it takes quite a bit of fuel to actually circularize around, and obviously unlike Jool, it doesn't have a big moon like Tyler or Lathe, so you can do gravity assists to capture there for free. Unlike Juno, it doesn't have any atmosphere, and again, unlike Juno, it's much further away from Kerbin, so relative velocities and all that takes a lot more fuel to circularize. But, as you can see, circularize, we now have. There we are, captured in Dres orbit. So now we're going to create a maneuver node and try and get an encounter with the wormhole that's going to take us to the Tuun system. Will the name of it be on screen long enough to be able to say what its name is? Let's see. Oh, what did I say? Borgal's Anomaly A? Was that? I mean, I could actually just open up the Promised Worlds wiki. 1 second. Okay, I'm back from the KSP Promised Worlds wiki. Okay, so the two wormholes in orbit of Dres are as follows. First, we have Kevba's Anomaly A, which is a wormhole connecting the Kerbal system with the Deb system, orbiting Gerdama on the other side, with this side obviously in orbit of Dres. The second wormhole, which is where we're going today, is Borgal's Anomaly A, which is a wormhole with one side in Dres orbit and the other side in orbit of Puff in the Tuun system. By the way, I feel like I should quickly mention that, at least in the current early access build of Promised Worlds, the wormholes will not be here by default. If you just install the mod and open it up, you won't have these. You basically... you need to go into the Promised Worlds folder in your game data folder, find the config file and open it in something like Notepad, and change wormholes equals false to wormholes equals true. The mod comes with a readme file that explains this more. I've decided not to include an on-screen tutorial here as the mod is in early access, so this might change later on so that it's enabled or disabled via in-game UI or via a different setting that would make this video a bit outdated. Not that it won't be outdated at some stage anyway, because as mentioned, the Tuun system is as yet incomplete. It doesn't yet have all of its planned planets and moons. But we'll go over that a little bit more in just a second. Right now, as you can see, we have entered the sphere of influence of Borgal's Anomaly A. So let us now enter the anomaly. And we have arrived in the Tuun system. I have now very helpfully moved the camera, but blinking you would have missed it. There was the planet Puff below us, ripe for exploration. And yes, I'm only going to be focusing on Puff in this particular video because the Tuun system is not yet done. And honestly, I'm just really excited to see this system when it's completed because it looks really, really exciting. So, you know, Deb, the other system in the Promised Worlds mod I've explored so far, is a really challenging system because Deb is a very young star, so all the planets are very, very hostile. Tuun, however, is a much more established system that's ideal for harboring life. So the Promised Worlds wiki describes the Tuun system as dense and alien, and a prime destination for daring explorers. 11 exotic worlds are anchored around a massive F-class star. Brave the barycenter of Rask and Rusk, navigate the deep depths of Puff's super ocean, and dive into Verda's cloud deck in this ultimate interstellar adventure. Tuun itself is bigger, brighter, hotter, massier, an F-type's main sequence star, and is the brightest star in Kerbin's night sky. Its Goldilocks zone is massive, meaning this star system has more potential for life than the Kerbal system. maybe you'll turn over a rock and find a teeny tiny space center. Now, since Puff is below us, I can also tell you how the wiki describes it. When we first observed Puff, we were shocked to see it staring right back at us. That pupil-like sea is no ordinary sea, but the deepest sea we've ever seen, eating over 100 kilometers into the ground. These depths were lightly formed when an asteroid carved through Puff's low-density surface. The tenuous methane atmosphere and unusually low gravity makes it a relatively easy destination. We can't quite describe it, but there's something unsettling about this planet. So, there you are. And yes, in real life, I work with eyes, so maybe that's a reason I was particularly drawn to this planet to explore. I'm also fascinated by the ocean, so that's kind of another reason, really. Deep, deep water, I don't know, just kind of freaks me out. I don't know why. I guess Puff kind of looks a bit like an eye with congenital glaucoma, maybe with a dash of oculodermal melanocytosis to explain the color of the sclera. But anyway, it looks like an eye, and eyeball planets like this are a real hypothesized thing in real life. So Promise World explains that the superocean on Puff could be due to an asteroid impact, though an alternate theory is that it could be tidally locked to Tuun, inducing a spatially dependent temperature gradient that's limiting the places in which liquid can exist on its surface, i.e. the bit that faces the star. Blasted by the most heat is the area where the ocean is observed. By the way, now that we've arrived in a low Puff orbit, I'm now just reconfiguring the ship to be the permanent space station it'll be for future expeditions, not just to the Puff system, but also for the Tuun system in general. I'm leaving the big nuclear transfer stage attached so that hypothetically over time, that mining rig can continually go down to the surface of Puff, redock with the station, and gradually fill up all of those liquid fuel tanks so that a future expedition could come to this space station. It can then be reconfigured into kind of a more linear thing, and it can depart to go to into orbit of a different planet in the Tuun system for kind of further adventures. So that's kind of the design of this ship. Right now we're just kind of separating all the individual vessels, and we can dock them all together, although I'm not going to bother docking the mining ship to the space station, because that could just go straight down to the surface and start gathering up resources, gathering up fuel, gathering up ore, and then converting the ore into fuel to synthesize so that we can fill up the lander, basically, and then do a landing down to the surface. Multiple landings down to the surface with all three crew, but getting a bit ahead of myself there. Ready for it? There we are. So the nuclear stage is now docked to the space station. We're just going to dock the lander now to one of those side docking ports, and then, we can start getting the lander down to the surface. Now, I had this issue. My hope was that Jebediah Kerman is a pilot Kerbal on board the space station, so I figured that he could remotely control the mining ship, so we wouldn't need to send a Kerbal down to the surface. And, basically, if you don't have a pilot Kerbal or a connection to the KSC, you can't do things like plan maneuver nodes and stuff like that, and you don't have limited SAS control with the difficulty settings I'm playing as, and that's what I've got on this ship. We have remote control. Jebediah comes remotely controlling it to give us those abilities. But when I change to this one, okay, I've just looked at the screen and it's working now. So Jebediah Kerman is offering remote control to do those things. When I did a test flight, it didn't work at all, and I got really frustrated. So I, as a safeguard, added a command pod, to this ship, so we can send a Kerbal down with it, and Bill Kerman can kind of pilot it for us. But it seems to be working, so this is a bit of a shame. So I guess I could have just had this mining ship land autonomously, and Jebediah Kerman could have remotely controlled it, and Bill, Bob, and Jeb, whilst the mining ship's just, mining stuff and synthesizing stuff, they could have stayed in stasis, because this is going to be a long old excursion down to the surface. It took a very long time, multiple years, to fill up the lander's fuel tanks. So kind of a bit of a shame. But whatever, it's a video game, and Kerbals, they're not built like you and I. They just love being in space. I guess technically Bill is not in space. He's in the atmosphere of Puff. But whatever, he's on an alien world, and that's good enough for him. Now, we are going to do some mining on the surface. I'm going to have to use Time Warp as well, so I'm aware that if you have photosensitivity, like epilepsy, I would look away from the screen. I'll verbally say when it's safe to look at the screen again, because we're going to be doing lots of time warping. So there's going to be some flashes of light while the sun rises and sets in rapid succession. I am going to fade across to, I'll show the beginning of the time warping and then the end of the time warping, so you can see how long it actually took for the mining ship to fully stock its fuel tanks. But I don't really want to subject you guys to just 5 minutes of just strobing of the lighting. So let's see, we're going to start our drills. Our solar panels are extended and they are tracking Tuun rather than tracking, Kerbal. And now the time warp can commence. So there we are. Like I say, if you should be looking away now if you have any kind of photosensitivity. I kind of messed up time warp here. I couldn't time warp fully because then the drills would just shut down. So now we're going to fade across to 6 years and 165 days. We finally have fully fueled tanks. So I guess I could have brought a satellite with us to kind of scan the surface of Puff and find a more optimal place to mine. But as you can see, the surface of Puff is really hilly, and so it was kind of just it was going to be a trial and error basis, trying to find an area flat enough for the lander to land where it's not going to tip over, basically. So I thought, we'll bring the big drills, the big ISRU, and so it'll be fine. It turned out it wasn't fine. Puff has apparently got really scarce amounts of usable ore, but we did manage to find enough usable ore to fully refill our fuel tanks and our monopropellant tank, so we can go to the space station now and fill it up. So yes, off we go back to orbit of Puff. And yeah, I kind of interrupted my explanation about eyeball planets, but yeah, Puff is an eyeball planet, and one of the hypothesized ways in which they form is by the fact that they're tidally locked to their host body, and then that kind of creates an ocean at the part that faces the host body. And because most celestial bodies naturally follow a tendency to become tidally locked to their host body with enough time, it is speculated in real life that eyeball planets could be quite common and could be our best bets at discovering alien life, especially in planetary systems of red and brown dwarfs, because they have much longer lifespans than main sequence stars. So if you want some further reading, the super Earth Kepler 1652b is believed to be a potential eyeball planet. It's a super Earth and it orbits within its star's habitable zone. And interestingly, it was only discovered in 2017, the year in which KSP2's development started. So maybe its discovery was an inspiration for them to create Puff. I'll put it on screen is the KSP2 pre-alpha footage of Puff, and I think the devs of Promised Worlds have captured it really well here. And I should mention that Promised Worlds is comprised of entirely original assets, by the way. Nothing has been copied across from KSP2. It's all just been a faithful recreation from screenshots and videos, and I guess things like text file information about the planets that were to be added to KSP2 before it all got shut down, basically. Now, we have a huge amount of fuel in our tanker ship just here, but it's not going to be enough to fully fill both the lander and the onboard fuel containers of the space station itself. It's enough to support at least 2 surface missions though, which is what I wanted to do in this video. One down to the eerie super ocean itself, and one down to the rocky plains of the rest of the planet, but not enough for many more excursions. But this is where I am now going to invoke the rule of the French. I have proven that this mining ship is capable of going down to the surface of Puff, successfully mine ore and fill its tanks up, and then return to the station. If this were KSP2 in its promised completed state, we would therefore be able to set this as an automated route, so the game will continually simulate the mining ship returning to the surface of Puff, repeating the mining we just did, returning to the station, transferring its fuel to the station's reserves, and then repeat ad infinitum. Unfortunately, such a system does not exist in Kerbal Space Program 1, or Kerbal Space Program 2, so I invoke the law of the French. I have proven this system works, and because I have a life to lead and don't want to sit through the monotony of repeating this rather mundane refueling task, I'm going to use HyperEdit to complete the filling up of the station's tanks. So yes, technically I'm using cheats, but not due to lack of either this ship's or my own abilities, but simply for the sake of brevity and the fact I don't want this video to be, even longer than it already is. Now, I call this the rule of the French because this was one of the allowed clauses in the Kerbal Space Program Esports event that I entered with my teammate and fellow KSP YouTuber, the Beardy Penguin, that we won. The competition was in France and organised by French people, and it allowed using cheats in the manner I'm about to use them to refuel vessels, or even do things like placing identically massed payloads to curb in orbit, or recovering booster first stages, etc., just in the name of saving time and letting teams focus on the more fun aspects of extending, their space programs and their missions to the moon and Mars. Now, I did detach the interstellar transfer stage because I felt like it wouldn't really be right to fill up this one fully because, I don't know, it just felt a bit wrong, right? So I detached it, used HyperEdit to fill up the fuel tanks of, you know, the rest of the space station and our crew lander, and then we can just reattach it like that, and there we have it. But yeah, the video of mine and NVIDIA Penguin's esports journey is still actually one of my favorite videos of mine that I've ever made to this date. So if you haven't seen that video, then I will put a card on screen and link below for you to watch. I think it's still the default video that plays if you open my channel as a non-subscriber because of how happy I am with the video. Anyway, we have now transferred Bob Kerman, Jebediah Kerman, and Bill Kerman to the crewed surface lander. Well, I guess not technically the surface lander, it's the ocean lander, because we're going to be landing in that very unsettling ocean. Yeah, there's something about very, very deep water that just really gives me the creeps. Like, especially when you look at like photos and videos of those ocean drop-offs you get, where it's just a sheer drop into the abyss. Ooh, it really fascinates me. I get really interested in it. But it also kind of gives me the old heebie-jeebies. That being said, Subnautica is one of my favorite games. Subnautica, people say, is really, really scary. I don't find Subnautica scary at all. I just find it really, really fun to explore, the depths of the ocean. Well, the submarine games I've played, I've played Iron Lung. I haven't watched the film yet, but I really enjoyed Iron Lung. That one kind of gave me a bit of the heebie-jeebie feeling. But and I guess Kerbal Space Program, right? This big ocean like this, I'm like, oh, kind of creeps me out a little bit. See that big, vast ocean looming below us as we descend down. So yeah, Puff has an atmosphere, so we can use parachutes just like we did with our mining ship. And just like with our mining ship, we can't depend on the parachutes completely because the atmosphere is rather thin. So we have these 3 aerospike engines to perform kind of the final part of our deceleration prior to splashdown. Yeah, look at that. We've now deployed the lily pad style landing legs. We have some more parachutes deploying. Actually, our surface speed, now I mention it, is coming down quite slowly. Seems to be tapering out at 31 meters per second, although the other 2 parachutes have not yet fully deployed. There we are. They've done so. So now, I guess we're coming down to a survivable speed, but we ought to still fire up those aerospike engines just so we're coming down. I kind of aim for below 5 meters per second. So here we are. That deep, dark ocean gradually appearing. Oh, here we go. And there we have it. Splash down in the super ocean of Puff. I don't know if it's got a name. I see from the Kerbal Engineer readouts that this particular biome is called the Crater Shallows. But let's get a Kerbal out on EVA just a second and see just how shallow these so-called shallows really are. It's very, very deep, this ocean. But first of all, we're going to run some science experiments. We're going to try and see if we can maximize the amount of scientific experimental output we can get from this mission. I did forget to bring an atmosphere scanner, so that's kind of on me, but oh, what kind of monsters lurk below the depths just there. You kind of get very quick, brief glimpses of just how deep this ocean goes by moving the camera in between, kind of clipping it into the actual water surface texture, I guess, is what's happening. So you can kind of see a glimpse there, but yeah, very, very creepy. Might be worth building some sort of submersible and trying to get it into those deep trenches that you can see dipping below the kind of main what's it called, seabed of this ocean. So there we are. Bill Kerman also wants to join in on the terror that Bob Kerman is presumably subjecting himself to. Yeah, so at the moment you can see the lander is standing nice and true because Jebediah Kerman is on board, making sure the SAS unit remains, functional and controlling the ship. But then Jebediah Kerman decided to go on EVA as well, and everything started off okay, and then you can see gradually things started to not go so well. The lander started tipping over, so then Jebediah Kerman course corrected and started trying to get back on board the ship so we could re-enable SAS. Another thing I could have done better was add a probe core to this craft so that it could maintain kind of verticalness without a Kerbal on board, but whatever. If you want to make any modifications to this craft yourself, you can download it from the video description. If you're a Patreon member or a member of my YouTube members program, you'll have a link to your very own version of this video with no ads or anything in it, And in the description of that video, you will find a download link. And if you didn't get a notification for your video, then in the description of this video, there's a link if you're a YouTube member and a link to click if you're a Patreon member. Yeah, I don't really like doing like the whole Patreon and member exclusivity stuff because I don't like dividing people up on, disposable income. And I feel like the craft files are fairly inconsequential because I do show you guys how to make it with the time-lapse at the beginning. And I always want to encourage people to build their crafts for themselves anyway, rather than just downloading stuff, because you won't learn that way. So yes. Anyway, Bob seems to be getting back on board rather quickly. Wait a second. Do you guys hear something? Oh my gosh. What is that? Alright, nope. Let's get to the map screen quickly. Alright, let's just... Okay, let's try time warp to a point where we can lift off.
Detecting multiple Leviathan class life forms in the region. Are you certain whatever you're doing is worth it?
Nope, not worth it. Let's just go. Oh, let's get away from whatever's making that noise. So, there we have it. Thank goodness. We have survived the terrifying mega ocean of Puff, over 100 kilometers deep and harboring what knows kind of eldritch horrors lie beneath its surface, quite honestly. Let's never ever go back. Luckily, as I said earlier, this lander can land on both water and land on land. So once we return to the space station, we can refuel and then try and land somewhere on Puff that's a little bit drier. But yes, have you visited the Tuun system of the Promised Worlds mod yet? Do let me know. I sometimes, go on like the KSP forums or the Reddit or just search on YouTube like missions to the, Promised Worlds and Tuun systems, and there aren't really that many videos showcasing missions, especially not stock ones. So it is kind of interesting to hear what people have experienced that haven't been documented on the forums or Reddit or something. Maybe post to the forums or the subreddit or my Discord server to showcase your designs, because I think especially things like this where it has to like a Puff lander, that has to land in both the ocean and on land. It's always fun to see what people come up with, because aquatic landers can sometimes be a little bit challenging to engineer, because it obviously has to be able to stay up upright in the water like mine didn't and also be able to land on land. And I really like my little solution here, but I always love seeing kind of how other people solve the same sort of engineering problems. So yeah, any stories, leave them below in the comments section below. Just looking back at the screen whilst I finish that little ramble just there. Oh yeah, there's the space station there, sitting serenely in orbit as we coast towards it. This lander is definitely very overpowered for Puff. Having 3 aerospike engines was definitely a very extreme. I think if I were to revise this craft and improve it, I'd probably just have 2, or probably just even 1 actually, aerospike engine powering this thing, because it has excessive thrust weight ratio over what it really needs to be able to do. I'd probably also add a little submersible craft just there to see if we could ascertain exactly what kind of monster was making those sounds we heard on the surface of the ocean. But I guess that's a story for another time. As you can see, we have now redocked with the space station, so let us just time warp to the daytime side of Puff so we can get a nicer view of what's happening, this being a video and all that, and then we can right click on the space station's giant orange fuel tank and refuel the comparatively smaller but still orange fuel tank of the surface lander. And then we can get the Kerbals. Well, we could basically waste no time at all in undocking it and going back down to the surface. Well, actually, I think what I did was I just ran our science experiments now, because we are technically our situation is in space high above Puff. I think, you might have to rewind the video and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I did run the experiments while we were in space high above Puff, but then we entered its atmosphere and I'd forgotten to go ahead and gather the data and restore the Science Junior and Mystery Goo unit, so I just ran the experiments again, overwriting the science experiments from space high above Puff, with the intention that we can just rerun those later once we're back in space. So that's why I reran those experiments again. I just time warped around to a point where I'm like, okay, we're kind of over an interesting spot of land. We can deorbit the lander and go ahead and explore the surface of Puff. I added a little bit more monopropellant to the lander as well, just to kind of help with our rendezvous once we get back to the orbiting space station. There's the map screen there. I did kind of survey the surface of Puff from the map screen, see if there are any kind of interesting geological features, aside from the obvious giant eyeball super ocean. And, well, I guess it's not really... The whole thing's the eyeball, right? The ocean is kind of the cornea, or the pupil, whatever you want to call it. The rest of the planet looks fairly uninteresting. It all looks kind of the same. Still challenging, though. Like, it's very, very undulating. I guess those kind of, like... They almost look like springs, don't they? There's like a sort of aquatic area just to the left, or I guess west would be a better, more accurate term, of the main ocean. I did think about going there, but I thought, let's try and keep things really, really varied. Let's go somewhere completely barren and dry to showcase the contrasting areas between the ocean of Puff and, I guess, kind of the lakes, puddles, springs at the edges of the ocean compared to, like, the rest of the planet itself. So here we are, descending down once again. I should have mentioned that the mining ship and the crew lander have these air brakes at the top of the stack, just to make sure that we don't flip ourselves nose first during descent. What also helps there are the parachutes. They will obviously help us keep ourselves pointing engines down throughout the descent as well. So there we are. So we've deployed the parachutes, or 2 of the parachutes at least, and our lily pad landing legs. And then just looking down, we're coming down to kind of a flat area. Again, Puff, especially when using parachutes, there is quite a bit of trial and error. I'm not going to lie to you guys, what you saw was not take 1 of me landing the mining ship. I think I took like 3 attempts landing it somewhere before I finally settled down somewhere reasonably flat where it didn't just fall over and explode immediately. Although that was using landing legs. This lander does not use landing legs. It uses robotic parts and grip pads, which ironically are vastly superior to landing legs because look, we don't slide around as if the surface were made of ice. Gosh, I wish KSP had just stayed in development like 6 months longer than it was, just so they could have fixed the ridiculousness that is, you know, the landing legs acting like ice skates, even on surfaces like Juno and Eve, which, you know, I would imagine would be fairly rocky and sturdy. You just slide around. It's really infuriating. But I guess we do have grip pads so that we can engineer our own landing legs, and I think there are mods that add landing legs that have grippy surfaces, so I really should investigate that more. Though that being said, I did want to keep this mission stock, albeit with the DLCs, because I feel like we're making use of the wormholes, and I feel like the wormholes are there to facilitate stock players, or at least players that play with parts that are mostly in line with stock, i.e. modded engines all perform, you know, comparatively to the engine's performance that you get in stock Kerbal Space Program. You don't get anything ridiculous like the Daedalus engine or Orion drive or anything like that. Yeah, I thought I'd just Jebediah come do a little bit of base jumping just there, deploy his parachute. Not really sure why. We didn't really have enough time to meaningfully deploy, and of course Puff's atmosphere is very thin, so didn't go particularly well. But yeah, all 3 of our Kerbals are on EVA, and listen to that. I don't hear any signs of any monsters or anything, so that's excellent. Which is just as well, because Jebediah Kerman seems to be taking a very convoluted route to get back into the command pod. Although, because we're not floating on the water anymore, he was able to go on EVA and the lander did not fall over. So we could get all 3 Kerbals out on EVA for this little excursion to the surface of Puff. Now, like I say, we do have enough fuel to basically do, well, effectively infinite number of landings on Puff because we have our mining ship and all that. But I felt like, you know, for the purposes of this video, it's all going to be a bit samey, right, if I keep on doing landings over and over again. So I could go ahead and visit the Springs area. I don't know what the actual biome is called, or even the polar regions of Puff. I think we'll leave it there for our exploration of this planet for now. Maybe future expeditions, we can revisit it and go somewhere else. But hey, maybe this video will hopefully inspire you to do your own missions to Puff. So there you are. That's what these 2 regions look like. Maybe you'll explore somewhere else and find somewhere even more interesting than what we found so far. And if you could find out what was making those horrible noises in the ocean, I think I'd very much appreciate it. So there we are. We have lifted off. We've retracted our landing legs. Just to be a case now of going back to space and getting back to the space station. We're kind of launching at a horrible moment. As you can see, the space station is not really above us. I tried to point our lander kind of along a more normal, like the normal axis on the nav ball, but the air resistance wasn't really allowing me to deviate too far from prograde, so we're ending up just going into this really arcing ballistic trajectory, and then we'll just do a really expensive burn to match our orbit with the space station. Later on, as you can see, we've used not even half of our fuel just yet, so at this stage I wasn't really all that concerned about fuel efficiency because we have more than enough fuel to perform this part of the mission. So there we are. There's our little encounter nodes just there, relatively close together. We can get a bit closer by playing around with the maneuver node nodes, though once we reach that point of closest separation, our speed relative to our target speed is going to be pretty high given the relatively large orbital inclination difference between the two vessels, which means that burn that we do at the point of closest separation that we'll do to match speeds with the space station is going to be a long one, meaning that ultimately our separation isn't going to be that close. We'll need to do another few maneuvers to actually get onto final approach to the Puff station, and as you can see, I believe I massively overshot our maneuver node as well, meaning that we don't even have a very good separation distance between the target vessel and us. So luckily, like I say, we have a surplus of fuel, so it didn't really matter. But yes, I got a little bit trigger happy with the old time warp just then. So here we are once again, setting up another maneuver node that's going to get us a relatively, close separation. But again, because we have a very large orbital inclination difference between us and the space station, that retrograde burn relative to target that we do at that closest separation point is going to be a long burn. As you can see, we've got more than 400 meters per second difference between the two vessels. So yeah, and I've overshot once again. So yeah, we'll kill off all of our speed relative to our target, and then we'll see where we stand. So there we are, basically at 0. Now we're going to point towards the target, which we can now see in that little graticule on screen. And there we are. A separation of about 300 meters, which is good enough for me. From there, we can just eyeball it. We don't want to get too close because we do need to maneuver the craft, like as in the craft we're controlling, to kind of line up with one of the available docking ports in the middle of the space station. As you can see, using just altering our little FOV just there, we can see one of those docking ports is just there, basically. So we can go ahead and form the docking. I feel like I'm now at that flagging stage, when I do these really long, hour-long commentaries. After like sort of 35, 40 minutes, I do then start to really clutch at straws, trying to maintain a stable stream of consciousness because, I feel like I talk about everything and then I'm like, oh gosh, got 20 minutes now where I don't really got anything to discuss and like this relative and on point because I've already discussed reaching orbit once, I've already discussed refueling, I've already discussed this vessel, I think. I don't think there's anything else I need to cover. So yeah, I guess it would have been nice to do a little tour of the space station, actually, though it is stock parts, and you guys are probably all familiar with what the stock parts look like on IVA at this point, so I guess I didn't really need to, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, because we finished our missions down to the surface of Puff, and indeed have, I think at least, that we've gathered science from space near to Puff and space high above Puff. We've gathered all the science we need. So Bob Cohen has gone ahead and restored the Science Junior and Mystery Goo experiments, taken all the data from the crewed lander, and he's stored it on board our Kerbin return vessel. Because yes, we have the big main 3 Kerbals, right? Jebediah, Bill and Bob Kerman, and I don't like leaving them on like long-term expeditions. I like having them available for missions. Now when I'm doing like space station insertions, I'll then use an expendable crew, as in no-name Kerbals. I don't really care if they don't come back or not, but I want Jeb, Bob and Bill back, so they're going to come back on the Kerbin return vessel. That leaves a little docking port available at the front of the ship, so any kind of future expeditions to Puff can literally just be a much smaller vessel, like literally not much bigger than the Kerbin return vessel that Jeb, Bill and Bob are currently sitting on board. They can dock with the space station, where of course the mining ship will have continued to go down to the surface of Puff, come back, refuel the ship, and I guess could eventually refill the liquid fuel tanks that power the interplanetary nuclear stage as well, or I guess you could even call it the interstellar nuclear stage, even though the wormhole did the lion's share of the interstellar, traveling, I suppose. But yeah, that could refuel it, and then we can go down to another planet in the Tuun system. There's loads of really cool places. I think the next most interesting place, well, Rask and Rusk are really cool because it's like a binary planet system, but there's a gas giant called Nodge, I believe it's called, which has a moon called Merble, which looks really, really cool. It looks like a blue marble. Maybe that's why it's called Merble, I don't know. But it's got these 2 giant ice caps, like a North and South Pole ice cap. I don't know why I needed to clarify it was the North and South Pole, with this big blue ocean, maybe of ammonia, I'm not sure. It looks, basically, it's an interesting looking planet. It's got an atmosphere, or moon I should say. It's got an atmosphere, it's got an ocean. That's good enough for me. I love a good planet or a moon with an ocean in Kerbal Space Program. Even ones as terrifying as this one here, such as, you can see those land masses, well not land masses, but you know what I mean, the underwater, features. Can't see any monsters or anything lurking below, but maybe that's what they want you to think. I don't know. Let's not spend too much longer staring into the abyss that is Puff's terrifying ocean. Is it just me? Am I just being weird? I don't know. There's just something really unsettling about big, mysterious bodies of water. Anyway, we're now time warping to the wormhole, and now we are going to enter. we have made it back home to the Kerbal system, but is all as it should be? The answer is no, it is not. If you notice, during time warping round now, you'll see the ship will not maintain a steady course, but instead will spin around wildly. It won't like maintain, you know, prograde or retrograde or whatever. See what I mean here? It just spins around, which is not typical in Kerbal Space Program when you have SAS control. We've got full electric charge, so I'm not quite sure what was happening. I think it might have been something to do with the wormhole physics, might have messed things up, because basically maneuver nodes weren't really behaving as they should have been, burns weren't really acting as they should have been, and then I made a quick save and a quick loaded it, and then everything was fixed. So you're going to see that happen at some point in this part of the video. I'm not sure exactly when, but there's only 5 minutes left, so relatively soon, right? As you can see, we were ejected directly from Dres's orbit, so we never circularized around Dres or anything. We're going straight into orbit around Kerbal, and then we'll make a maneuver node from Kerbal orbit. It's going to get us an encounter with Kerbal, which you can see me plotting right now. We do have an ablative heat shield on our crew module, so wasn't really that worried about, you know, minimizing the our relative speed relative to Kerbin's, because ablative heat shields in Kerbal Space Program are very, very overpowered. So I knew that we would survive no matter what our re-entry speed was, basically. So, yeah, as you can see, got a fairly expensive burn, but the return ship from that's going to get us, obviously designed to take us from Puff to Kerbin, has a huge amount of Delta V just to kind of account for any issues like this. Like, I wasn't really sure what kind of angle would be ejected from the wormhole at, although let's just have lots of Delta V just in case you have to get home from some weird orbit around the sun. So that was the methodology behind that. Although we did end up using quite a lot of our fuel budget just getting back home. So yeah, as you can see, our our separation from Kerbin is not that close at our closest approach. We have to do a correction burn, just try and get those little grey encounter nodes a little bit closer. But yeah, now we are on the final kind of leg of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Has this video inspired you to download the Promised World Early Access mod and try out exploring not just Puff, but any of the other planets in the Tuun system? Like I say, I do think Rask and Rusk are definitely worth a visit. They're a really cool kind of fiery looking binary planet system. The two planets orbit each other basically, and obviously we've got the big beautiful gas giant with its beautiful rings called Glumo. That so far has got 2 moons. We've got a really small one called Nodge, and again Merble, that really interesting looking one with the big ice caps and big blue ocean. Those definitely look like 2 interesting places to visit. But that's it so far. We've got Puff and we've got Puff, Rask and Rusk and Glumo. That's it so far, but the devs are going to keep on adding more and more planets and moons to the Tuun system as the mod continues to receive updates. And it's not going to stop at just Deb and Tuun. They are working on a 3rd planetary system as well. It's called Keg, I think it's pronounced. It's spelled Q-E-G. So Keg, Queg, I'm not sure. Keg is not a promised feature, but it's in the very early concept phase of development. So far, all that's known about it on the Promised Worlds wiki is that the Keg system is likely a red giant, i.e. a star, at the end of its life. No planets in Keg are known about at this time. That is the end of the description for Keg. So I don't know if it's still an intended feature or not of Promised Worlds, but I guess it is, kind of, maybe, once they've kind of finally finished, you know, the Deb system and the Tuun system. So, you know, lots of things to look forward to with the development of Promised Worlds. Certainly a lot more to look forward to than the development of Kerbal Space Program 2, which, of course, is not being developed anymore. But it was the inspiration of Promised Worlds. Yeah. Still get sad time to time thinking about KSP2. I had to watch the trailer again today when I made this video. I showed clips of the trailer. I was like, man, I remember in 2019, we had so much hope back then. Anyway, not to end the video on such a downer. You might notice I did like a quick load and quick save earlier on just then when the screen went black and then the vessel respawned and suddenly physics started behaving a bit more normally. That's what that was. And yeah, speaking of physics... we are, yeah, experiencing the tyranny of re-entry as the craft. I staged way too late. I time warped a bit. Well, I got a bit trigger happy with time warp, and I ended up realizing we were in the atmosphere and I hadn't yet detached the lower stage. So I quickly spammed with the space bar, and yeah, the craft separated and everything was fine, but perhaps not the most realistic of re-entries, but a safe re-entry nonetheless. As you can see, Bob Kerman, Jebediah Kerman, and Bill Kerman, they were fine. So nothing, do not, basically, guys, don't worry. As we pass through the clouds at night, touching down in the grasslands biome of Kerbin. Ready? And we have touchdown. So we can just time warp today to get a nice sort of final view of our spacecraft. Although, as I said earlier, this was a practical science mission. Not that we needed the science points because the tech tree is fully unlocked on this save, but still it's nice to see what we can unlock. So let's recover the vessel and see the spoils of our mission. There we are, 6,801.0 science earned. So there we are. Not a huge, reward, but I feel like if you're doing an interstellar mission to Puff, you've already kind of unlocked the tech tree. Anyway, that is the end of the video, so thank you so much, guys, for watching. Thank you so much once again to Daedalic Entertainment and Game Excite for sponsoring this video. Check out their new game, Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown, in the link in the description. And of course, massive thanks to the names on the right side of the screen, my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. You've got your own version of this video with access to the craft file. Check out your links in the description. But that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.